Hello and welcome to today's live chat, and which it will be for the 79th anniversary of the attempted coup to overthrow Hitler, the bomb plot of the 20th of July 1944. This is a live broadcast, and so what you can do is, if you want to ask anything, please go and ask. It doesn't have to be about the bomb plot itself, could be about other things, but as it's a live broadcast, please try and keep the language appropriate. This is the first time I have done a live broadcast from this seat, and I thought this was quite good because you've got the panorama behind me, like they do in news programs. I've got things moving behind, and so I thought, oh, that looks really good. So out the front of the motorhome, you can see. But if you can't see me, I mean I seem to be visible, but if it might be dark in front and light behind that, I don't know. Here today, what I want to do is not to talk about the events leading up to the 20th of July. Hello, Mike. But only to talk about the events of the 20th of July, and in particular, what I'd like to concentrate on is the 20th of July in Berlin, more than anything else. Hello, Michael. So we have several attempts to get rid of Hitler, and they fail for one reason or another. Hitler had incredible luck. And if you see, for example, the first serious attempt to kill Hitler, because there was a number, but of sort of vague attempts. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Starting off, the first one was in the Kaiserhof Hotel in the early 30s, where it was probably a case of food poisoning. But it has been said to have been an attempt at killing Hitler. The bomb blast of the 9th of November 1939 was the first serious attempt to kill Hitler, and then there were several attempts during the war. The one which came the closest was at Smolensk in March of 1943, where a bomb was put on a plane, but the bomb itself didn't fire. It turned out to be a manufacturing fault of the bomb, made in the United Kingdom, and it didn't work. There were other attempts to kill him, such as a suicide bombing, a couple of weeks later after this, which, because Hitler changed his schedule, didn't come off, and bombs were taken into meetings, but they decided not to go ahead with the Valkyrie plan. Now, so the plan was this, is that they would bump off Hitler, at the same time as bumping him off. The idea was to hit, also to get Goering and to get Himmler at the same time, being the possible heads of a new Third Reich. There was no point in just bumping off Hitler if then somebody else took his place. But by the time of the 20th of July, they realized that they'd have to try and go ahead and deal with Goering and Himmler and all the rest in their own time. At the same time as Hitler was bumped off, there was a plan called Valkyrie. The plan for Valkyrie actually even dates to pre-war in one form or another. And the idea of the Valkyrie plan was that when, if there were an uprising, as had occurred, for example, in 1918, it was an uprising of which stopped the Kapp putsch. If there was an uprising, initially it was thought of as an uprising of the German people against the regime, and later it became that there were more than 1 million foreign workers in the greater Berlin area. And so if there were an uprising of foreign workers, which, quite honest, doesn't seem very likely, but if there were, then Valkyrie, home defense, was put into operation to actually crush an uprising. So that was the point of the Valkyrie plan. But what the idea was, with the sort of the changed version, which was done largely by Stauffenberg, but with others as well, So if there were, they would seize power and then use the power that they seized for themselves. They would then turn on the potential Nazi elements, such as the SS and the security, the RSHA, and the others, and then they would put them out of action in order to put one of their own people into power and get rid of the Nazis. But then what would happen after that? That also is not clear, and that's really more of a subject for a novel rather than anything else. But that may be something for a different day. So on the night of the 19th to 20th of July 1944, Stauffenberg slept at his brother's place in Berlin-Wannsee. It's Tristanstrasse, and if you watch the video tomorrow, you can see what the place looks like. He left around 6 in the morning, and then with his adjutant, Heften, and General Helmut Stief, he flew to Rastenburg, and I think it was Wagner who put the plane at his disposal. Colin asked, how deeply was Canaris involved? I don't know, actually. I think this might have been exaggerated after the war, but I think he was more of a bystander than anything else. Now, the problem with Canaris is that the Abwehr officers were raided by the Gestapo the previous year, 1943. And what this did was that the opposition had already reached a peak, I would say, in the early spring of 1943, with the was about 3 attempts to kill Hitler, but the main one being the bomb on the plane in Smolensk. And this was done, I think, with the knowledge of certain people within the Abwehr. But by the time of the later time, by the summer of 1944, I think the Abwehr was much less involved. I think that this was done. There's a scientific word for this when you use, and I forgot to remember what it is, but it's in Danny what's his name? Danny Orbach's book on the plots against Hitler. He uses the word when you sort of use your groups of friends to sort of make a clique, sorry, not clique, a clique is something else, a clique around yourselves, and then it's a group of friends which tries to do a plot to overthrow a government or something like that, and I've forgotten the word, but what it was before, it was sort of these groups of people who sort of came together, but they were largely based on friends, whereas by 1944 it was clearly based on, it was military structures, and people were being brought in. The problem with a plot is, for example, if I decide I'm going to overthrow the government, the secret of it is not likely to get out. However, it's not likely to be successful because it's only me doing it. So therefore I need people to help me overthrow the government. But so I can speak to people who are watching this now, and maybe we can keep it a secret. But as people then start to look for people to do different jobs within this, the problem then becomes keeping it a secret. And actually, until very recently, I believed that Himmler was involved. I've now changed my mind. I know I've written this in, and fortunately I never did the video on why, but I've now have changed my mind. So that Himmler had nothing to do with the plot. Anyway, so Rastenburg, so the plane flies off to Rastenburg. Stauffenberg calmly has breakfast. I don't know what he had for breakfast. I did try to find out though. He's very calm about it. He places the bomb Now the next bit's very well known what happened, because he had brought 2 bombs with him. He could only arm one of them. The second bomb, had it been placed in his briefcase, it would. There was there's a program by the Discovery Channel done in 2005. They did it in Arizona, and that showed that had they left even the without the detonator put into it, if that had gone off, if that had been in the bag, it probably would have, almost certainly would have gone off as well. And then that it's hard to believe that Hitler could have survived it. Of course, we know what happened is that the briefcase was placed under the table. Somebody moved. It was Brandt who moved it, Colonel Brandt who moved it, and then the blast, instead of being in the center, actually went one direction, but it went in the opposite direction of where Hitler was. Everybody in the room was injured, but some were only really light injuries. Obviously, they'd have had the ears of a ring sometime. Others had extremely serious injuries, and there were people who were killed as well. A chain reaction. I don't think that's a chain reaction, Colin. I think a chain reaction is slightly different. But thing with explosives is this. I've actually done explosives courses. You have to put. You can even modern day explosive. You can even set a match to them, and they won't go off. And you've got to put the detonator inside, and then you have to somehow have something which will fire the detonator. Is normally done by an electrical charge. In the case of the bomb that was used in the bomb plot, it was acid, which would it seeped through, which allowed a charge to go through, and then the thing would explode. With the bomb that was put on the plane in March 1943, it's often said that it didn't go off because of the low temperatures. And now the people who planted the bomb on the plane knew that low temperatures it wouldn't fire, but that isn't the reason. It was I'm pretty convinced. Obviously, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty convinced from the evidence that I've seen that it was because of a manufacturing defect and not because of the temperature on the plane. So Stauffenberg then he gets out of the 3 cordons through the Wolf's Lair, sorry, being stopped at 2 of them and having difficulties at 1, gets on a plane and comes back. Now, if we go back to, so that's more or less as history. There's nothing there out of the ordinary. That was shown in the film Valkyrie and what have you. But now I'm getting onto the bits which are different to what is accepted history. Now, at Wolfschanze, the Wolf's Lair, the thing was to pull the communications, and they thought if they pulled the communications, no information could get out, and therefore the head would be chopped off the command structure. Well, that makes sense in certain circumstances, but not so much in something like this. General Feldgebel, who was in charge at of pulling the communications, he pulled the communications, but this only was for a few minutes, nothing else. And not only that, there was a link from the Wolf's Lair to Berlin, a direct link, which the plotters didn't know about, which seems to me to be somewhat strange. Now we have come to the bit which is really odd. It was noticed that Stauffenberg was missing pretty quickly, and they started to look for him. Now, Stauffenberg was on a plane flying back to Berlin. He landed at Rangsdorf, which is to the south of the, it's on the Ring Road on the southeast of Berlin. And then there's no one waiting for him, and so he has trouble getting into the center, to the Bendler block, which is where the army headquarters was. Now, the plan was that say to use the code word Valkyrie immediately, so that the army would be out on the streets, a cordon would be thrown up around the government quarter, and the SS, RSHA, and all the rest of them would be arrested, because in theory it was they who had killed Hitler, and they were trying to take power for themselves. That was the messages that was being put out. As it happened, they didn't put out the code word, and this allowed a lot of time. Now, Goebbels got a telephone call at around 20 minutes after the bomb went off. Yeah, Russian military take note. So there are some similarities. I was thinking of Prigozhin. And now Goebbels did nothing. There's been an attempt to kill Hitler, and within a couple of hours, about 4, I've forgotten the time. But anyway, it took about 3 hours. They asked why, from the Wolf's Lair, they asked why hasn't anything news of this actually been put out. Question is, was Goebbels sitting on the fence? Now, Goebbels used the excuse he had to have a suitable commentary to go around this attack on Hitler. Or maybe Goebbels didn't have a clue what was going on. Indeed, he got this message, then he cleared off to have a siesta. So it doesn't make any. So with that in mind, Valkyrie, well, it was only when Stauffenberg was at the airport, he found out that Valkyrie, the cordons hadn't gone up, nothing had happened, until a few minutes before he actually rang up to find out what was happening. And here we now see where the failure was. They didn't practice this out properly. Now, for example, if they'd done a dry run, they'd done a pretend attack on Hitler, and then they would have done the same route exactly. So start off at Tristanstrasse, get the car to the airport, get the plane, and pretend they've not bumped off Hitler, then come back to Rangsdorf, and then, for example, when there was no car available, we need to have a car at the airport to make sure that Stauffenberg can get there. This plot was dominated by Stauffenberg, and the other person who was really pushing it forward was Henning von Tresco, but he was out here in Poland. He was in Ostrów Mazowiecki, and so he was completely out of it. And the strange thing is that you've got these people. These are the people who planned some of the greatest military victories in world history, such as, for example, the Battle of Kiev in 1941, or maybe the counterattack after Stalingrad in March 1943. Some of the most important the greatest military thinking, I would say, and yet they showed themselves to be completely indecisive and unable to take decisions. But at the same time, the Wolfschanze, hello, David, there is exactly the same situations going on. There's not a lot to kill Hitler. Mussolini was turning up that day. Hitler has Mussolini sort of drive around on his train, go around in circles, or something of that nature. And then he turns up and Hitler gives Mussolini a tour around where the bomb had gone off. And meanwhile, there's a coup going on in Berlin. Now, the thing about putting out the cordons which were put up in Berlin was this. The city commandant was called General von Haase. And von Haase, then there was only one unit in Berlin, the Großdeutschland, and that was commanded by somebody called Riemer. And this is where conventional history sort of goes completely wrong, in my opinion. Now, von Haase told Riemer that Hitler it being killed, and there was disorder in the city. Riemer said, "But what happened?" Von Haase didn't know, but I didn't see it. I've just driven through the city. It seems to be perfectly calm to me. I mean, but if Hitler's dead, then surely Goering should take over in his place. But von Haase didn't know. He didn't know what to do. He hadn't been properly prepared. Not only that, when Riemer was in von Haase's office, a second officer, a Major I've forgotten his name now. Eggert or something. Eggert, I think it was. Anyway, when I do a video on this, a proper one, I'll get the facts clear. Anyway, so this 30-year-old major, he sort of hid papers so that Riemer couldn't actually see them. Anyway, so Riemer goes out and he puts the cordons up, and these cordons take an hour and a half to put up. Now that to me also seems suspicious. It can't have taken an hour and a half. I mean, they were in the same city as where the cordons have to go up. Was the Gross Deutschland brigade, as it was then, that badly prepared. Anyway, Riemer came to von Haase 3 times, so he came back to report that the cordons had gone up in the places. Then he got another order, and this time was to put a cordon to the north of the Anhalter Bahnhof. If you go to Berlin, the Anhalter Bahnhof, which was destroyed in the Second World War and then found itself in no man's, when there wasn't such a thing as no man's land, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but in the death sphere in East Germany. Was it a hot day? That's a very good question. Yeah, it was roasting on the 20th of July, 1944. The Anhalter Bahnhof, to the north of the Anhalter Bahnhof, was the Reichssecurity main office, the RSHA. So Riemer gets these instructions to put a cordon up down there, but it's not written RSHA, it's put the north of the Anhalter Bahnhof. He went back to von Haase and he said, "But I don't understand the order. Why didn't you just say it was the RSHA? Because I'd have done it anyway." Anyway, so that goes up. Then he hears he's got to arrest Goebbels. And here is the difference from every other history. What actually happened now was that Riemer said to von Haase that he couldn't arrest Goebbels. He was the wrong person to do it. The Gross Deutschland brigade had a sort of what in German is called a patron. I would call it an honorary colonel. And the Goebbels, as the Gauleiter of Berlin, was the honorary colonel of the Gross Deutschland brigade. Not only that, Riemer had been in Berlin since the end of May. So he did, 6 weeks, something. Actually, Stauffenberg was something very similar as well. Although Stauffenberg had, of course, been there earlier, before he went off to North Africa. Riemer, then he says he can't arrest Goebbels. He knows him. He's he's wearing on his sleeves the Gross Deutschland around his sleeves. He cannot arrest this person. It's wrong. So von Haase agreed, and so he sent somebody else to arrest Goebbels. In the meantime, there was a Lieutenant Hagen, and he had previously worked for Goebbels's propaganda ministry, and he'd been in touch. He got in touch with Goebbels because he thought there was something really wrong here. At this moment, they thought that maybe Hitler was dead, and this was a fight for power. They didn't know between who, but and there was a logical succession, because unlike in Russia today, where the regime you don't know who's in second in command is, but then it was clear it was Goering. Hitler had given instructions in 1941 that he was to take command. So Hagen was in touch with Goebbels. Now at this moment, Riemer thought that Goebbels was up to no good. And so he went to Haase and said, "Can he go around and see Goebbels?" And von Haase said, "No, he can't." But despite this, he did. He went round to see him. And as he entered, now according to what he said, his weapon was there was a round in the chamber. So it was cocked and ready to fire. So he probably had a Luger. So there was a round in the chamber, and the safety catch was off. And so he went in, had the gun in his hand, and Goebbels said to him, asked him what he was going to do. And Riemer said he wanted just to talk to him. He didn't know. And he said, everything is not clear to me, but I swore an oath to Hitler, and Hitler may be dead, but I'm still going to fulfill his orders. Thinking that he was fulfilling Hitler's orders because of Valkyrie. Then Goebbels said to him, but Hitler's still alive. I've just spoken to him. Yeah, Riemer says, well, can I speak to him? Goebbels rings up, speaks to Hitler, a few words with him, and then he passes the phone to Riemer. And Riemer, now, Riemer survived. He died in 1997. He said, after the war, you have plenty of time to say what he said after the war, that he said, do you recognize my voice? Right, now we're going to sort this lot out. We're going to finish off this plague. It's them responsible for all these defeats at the front. And now we're going to do something about them. You are now in charge. And you take your orders directly from me until Himmler turns up in Berlin. And anyway, so Himmler was then in Rastenburg. I had believed that he was in Hohenlychen, but he was in Rastenburg at the time. But what Himmler had done was he'd sent his wife south, out of Berlin the previous day. He sent her to Munich. She didn't get to Munich because by the time she got, I don't know where, I can't remember where it was, somewhere like Nuremberg or somewhere, or Augsburg. She found that the plot failed, so she didn't reach where she was. But he could only have done that had he known. But I mean, having seen this now, I mean, he wrote down where he was. It's known where he was. His actions are a bit odd, but I think that these are the actions more of a coward rather than somebody who was in the plot. I'm not saying coward because I mean I think I'd want to get out of the way as well. But then again, I'm not sending people off to their deaths as these people were. So once Riemer has spoken to Hitler, everything changes. Now, conventional history put it slightly different, that Riemer went there to arrest Goebbels. That's not true because that's quite clear. Someone else was supposed to do it. And that then in the film Valkyrie, Goebbels is waiting for him. He's got Hitler on the line, hanging up, waiting for him to turn up. And also in the film Valkyrie, it's Goebbels who says to Riemer, "Are you a true National Socialist?" In what Riemer said, what happened was the following: that Riemer asked him, said, "Can you give me on your word of honor that Hitler's still alive? Are you a true National Socialist?" Riemer asked him. Now, Riemer was put in charge, which meant that he was now the boss. He commanded people much more senior to him. A command post was set up in Goebbels' house, it was in Hermann Göring Strasse 20, which is now Ebertstrasse. It is next to where the Holocaust Memorial is today. It looks completely different, obviously, and near where the Chancellery building was. And so Riemer uses his Großdeutschland battalion, brigade, there to set up and there's about 200 people sort of in Goebbels' garden. At the meantime, he takes down the cordons that he'd put up around the government area, and he releases the people that had been detained from the SS, from Gestapo and RSHA and others. And then what he did was he rang up von Haase, who was in the Bendlerbach, which is about what, by foot, 15 minutes, something like that. And he tells von Haase to come round to him. Von Haase says, no, I'm a general, you come round to me. Then Riemer, still believing that von Haase was innocent, he had nothing to do with this coup, said that he apologized, but he said that Hitler has put me in charge. I'm afraid you've got to come round here, talk to me, and here, this is now my headquarters. Von Haase went there, and he pretended all innocent to Goebbels, and he congratulated Riemer for acting on his initiative and disobeying him and seeing Goebbels. And then it was absolutely really odd situation. Von Haase was given a room in Goebbels's home to sort of do what he had to do, but he was out of communications, like Speer as well. Albert Speer had turned up, and Goebbels had kept him there. He didn't need him there. I think he wanted to keep an eye on him to make sure that he wasn't part of the plot either. Von Haase thus lost his freedom, and as soon as this was over, he was arrested. Now, meanwhile, at the Bendler block, they realize things are not going very well. Now, the phone call to Hitler took place between 1830 and 1900 hours, and most books will tell you that this was the deciding moment. And for example, in David Irving's Hitler's War, he writes, if I can remember exact words, I'll try and remember the exact words, from this moment the coup was doomed. But it wasn't that moment. It had happened earlier. From around 1400 hours, when Stauffenberg was in the plane, Keitel was already trying to fight, was taking action to do something. And this is even before Valkyrie has been declared. From 450, I can't remember the time now. 1752. But a good 45 minutes before the conversation was between Goebbels and Riemer. It was broadcast on the radio that Hitler had survived an assassination attempt. And here we have a failure of it. Now, Riemer secured the radio for the Nazis. Had it been the other way round, had the plotters, the resistance, captured the radio, what they should have done, and then started putting out all sorts, news flashes and news information, all sorts of stuff. But they didn't do that. And now this is really odd. Goebbels said afterwards, how could they not do that? Now, as things were changing, people started leaving the Bendler block, hoping to save their own lives. And there were officers in there who realized that they were still loyal to the Nazi regime. And one of them was a young lieutenant colonel. He had the key to the armory, and he got a couple of other high-ranking officers, and they sort of took as many grenades and MP38s and ammunition and what have you. And then they arrested effectively the plotters. It wasn't quite as was shown in the film Valkyrie. Now, General Fromm, the head of the Home Army, the Reserve Army, who had clearly been involved in the preparation, but he didn't know which side he was on. He had been arrested by the plotters at the beginning of when Valkyrie was declared. He was supposed to be able to declare Valkyrie, and he convened a court-martial consisting of himself and the plotters were sentenced to death. He arranged a firing squad from troops who were there and shot the 5 people. One of them, of course, committed suicide, General Beck, but the other 4 were shot by firing squad. And it was only then, after these shootings had taken place, that Riemer turned up. So it wasn't like it was in the film, for example, at all. And then they arrested who they could. For example, Stauffenberg's brother was arrested. There are lots of generals there, Herpener, and others were arrested. They eventually came up, well, eventually on the 7th of August 1944 they were put on trial, and they were killed next day. There were some people such as Gabel, who was at Wolfschanze, who was arrested quite quickly, but General Helmut Stief, he sat in his office waiting to be arrested. He was arrested between 11 and 12 that night. That must have been pretty terrifying for him, but he did leave a written account of what actually happened. Right, so I'll try and answer some of the questions now. So Colin asks, so a question, was it a hot day? Yes, it was. It was roasting. Was it just a shambles, or was it deliberately undermined by person or persons unknown? No, it was a shambles. It was badly organized. They didn't really believe that it was going to have success, and I think there's some truth to that von Tresco, and he said, look, we've got to show the world that we made an effort, that there are decent people in Germany, and if we don't do this, we need to do this for history. And that is something, they were doing something to show that they wanted to be remembered. So it was something good for Germany as far as he was concerned, and I think far as a lot of other people within this was concerned. But having said that, there were also some pretty nasty people such as Heldorf, such as Niebuhr or Wagner, who were involved in the plot as well, who were really evil people and should have been executed for the crimes that they had committed in the name of Hitler. It is what is hard to what would be interesting, I don't think anyone's even done this, is to have a look at the military careers of some of these people and then try and transfer that into the total shambles that this was. The only one who had a particularly, whose military career is particularly well known, I think, is General Herpner. Oh no, Witzleben as well. Beck, well, he never really commanded, well, he didn't command at all in the Second World War. So that would be curious. Anyway, who was in charge just after the bomb went off before Hitler came to his senses? Did a doctor decide? Oh, what's a really good question. Who was in charge? Well, effectively, no one was in charge. But Riemer said himself, obviously Riemer in Berlin, but he said, there's no one in charge. It's a headless state was the words he used in his recollection of this. And so you know, but there's always, I mean, if, for example, you know, the President of the United States needs to use the toilet, he goes off to the toilet. I mean, theoretically, he's not, there's no one in, he goes to sleep at night. There's no one in charge in theory. So it was one of these situations. As it happened, there was no decisions to be made. In the theoretical line of succession was clear, though. It was Goering. And right, so yeah, from Ranulph to Goebbels's place, and he got arrested the following morning. So I don't think he got any sleep that night. But Goebbels sort of said to him, "You were in a big hurry to have these people shot." I mean, quite honest, I can't think of anything worse that he could have done in the circumstances. Christos, have I seen the Recreation depicted on TV channel, History Channel? Recreation. I don't know what you mean. I have seen the one. I have seen the one where they did the experiments with the bombs. But if there was another one, which I think it probably was, in that case, no, I haven't actually seen it. And sorry, sorry, I can't see. The explosion. Sorry, I see you did mean the explosion. Yeah. So the explosion. Yes. Sorry, I'm just sort of going through the questions here. So not to be. Why didn't the army take Charles and Camilla into custody to put William and Kate on the throne? Well, that says Michael. Well, it wasn't actually the result. That wasn't the thing to do for the army. Right. So, Riemer was is just about the only person who survived. Hagen as well, of course, but who was in Berlin at the time, because of the plotters. Hardly anybody in Berlin. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I can't think of anybody who survived. Who was in Berlin? In Paris, yes. There were people, Stulpnagel, for example. But one of the questions is that, I mean, some of the bravery. Witzleben, he turned up. Now, a general who had been sacked by Hitler. So he turned up in full uniform, and then he thought it was a total shambles. Then he went back to his house, and he just waited there until the Gestapo turned up to arrest him. And that much incredible courage. One thing I do find quite unusual is that none of them attempted to escape, and this wouldn't have been that difficult. Okay, Niebuhr went underground, Gödel was underground, but Gödel had already been underground because the arrest warrant for him had been issued some time previously. In the aftermath, there was something called Operation Grid, which took place about, two weeks after. Now, the Operation Grid was something which had been prepared by the Nazi regime. It was the Nazi version of Valkyrie, in a way. This was the Gestapo arresting potential opposition people, and there was this massive roundup. And in this roundup, they got lots and lots of people, and some people have been hiding for many years. I mean, it's hard to believe why they hadn't actually they arrested them previously. Anyway, so were people picked up in that? Colin writes, execution of Plötzensee is a very profound and horrible place with the hooks. I was at Plötzensee 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately I got there too late. I thought it closed at 6, and I got there at 5, and then it was just about the last day that I was there, so I was unable to. I was staying with a company in I went to visit them, but I parked my van outside their offices, and it was just outside the zone which is paid, so that was quite convenient. But it was some distance to actually cycle in, and after about 10 days, I thought, oh look, I've been here long enough, so so Plötzensee, I should really have gone back to have another look at it, but anyway, I didn't. John says, I've always thought it's very weird that Fromm had them executed. Of course they wanted to interrogate him. By the way, was he related to Squeaky Fromm, one of Charlie's girls? I don't think that. Yeah, I know who you mean there. The Manson case. Yes, Squeaky Fromm. Yeah. No, they weren't. As far as I'm aware, they weren't. Related. I think Fromm did this as a matter of panic. He wasn't thinking properly. There may have been something in him that he wanted to get revenge, but what had they done to him? Fromm had wanted, when he found out that Stauffenberg had killed Hitler, then he, because that's what he believed. In the film, it's shown that he rang Keitel, and Keitel said no, he's okay, and he wanted to speak to Stauffenberg. But Fromm believed that Stauffenberg killed, and that's why he wanted. He told Stauffenberg to kill himself, and then he said, as he wouldn't declare Valkyrie, then the others they arrested him. They put him in a room. They gave him half a bottle of wine and some sandwiches. And so he was just shut in his room, and then after that, later that day, he said, well, now I'm going to do to you what you did to me. And then he had them shot. I mean, it really is, it's quite absurd to if he maybe should have just murdered them. Well, in fact, they were murdered because they weren't given a proper trial. But if that had happened, if they'd been killed in action, so to speak, or thrown a grenade at them or something like that to get rid of them, then that would be understandable from the point of view of the Gestapo and all the rest of it. But the way he did it so quickly, it was utterly obvious that he'd had something to do with the plot. I mean, of course, it'd be easy to say this, for me to say this, sitting in these comfortable surroundings and not being under the pressure that he would have been under. What about von Stauffenberg's wife and children? Nina, now there's something that was called Sippenhaft, which is that if you do something, then we'll get your wife and your kids. And right, so Nina was arrested. And so they didn't use the name Stauffenberg to her. They used the Schenk, Mrs. Schenk. They called her. The kids had their names changed, and but they were, after the war they were given back to the mother. Nina was pregnant. Her daughter was born in, can't quite remember when she was born. October, I think it was. Can't remember. But that daughter is she's a writer now. She's written material on Stauffenberg. Indeed, she was the one who said that during the Polish campaign, there was her father had prosecuted two German soldiers who'd actually killed a Polish woman, and anyway, but they were arrested, locked up, they're put in a concentration camp. But it wasn't it wasn't one of these people with the stripy uniforms and all that. They put in places where they were kept as hostages rather than having to do the hard labor that was associated with it. And the kids went into homes with the view of giving them to other people at a later date. Yeah, Count of Stauffenberg. So, right, very good. So, that's it, really. I mean, there's lots of things actually it's worth actually exploring on this. Himmler's behavior is odd, but I don't think he had anything. I don't think he had anything to do with it. I think because there was the meeting between Trotz and Himmler in August 1943, and I think that there was an attempt to bring Himmler in. Now, lots of people knew about it, but they said they they passed on joining. Manstein said that Prussian field marshals don't rebel. And there were other people who were approached. I mean, it's often assumed that Rommel was in on it. I personally don't think he was, but maybe he was. Stulpnagel certainly was. And so, I mean, it's total. It's a bit like there's the book War and Remembrance, which of course is a novel. But in the novel itself, I can recall that it was written. These were Keystone Cops characters. They totally failed to do something quite. And it's often said that this uneducated carpenter who placed the bomb in 1939, he came much closer to killing Hitler. Yes, but he didn't arrange a coup d'etat following it. Had the coup been properly worked out, had they could have chopped Hitler off, even alive, I believe that it could have worked, even with Hitler alive, had they seized power. Often the excuse used is that of their oath. This is just an excuse. It is true that as from 1935, there was an oath to Hitler. And this was brought in not because of the Nazi Party. This was brought in by the army. It was Blomberg who was forced to leave his post in 1938, who brought in the oath to Hitler. But all of the officers involved, or nearly all of them, grew up in the army in the Weimar Republic. They had sworn an oath to the Weimar Republic. What did they do about that? It was irrelevant to them. They'd sworn an oath in church to remain faithful until death to their wives. Did that mean anything to them? Not at all. This oath to Hitler was something which was conveniently discovered at the end of the war. Even I think Guderian says, this oath was really important, and I had to think of the oath. It was believed, incidentally, that Guderian was on the side of the rebels, although he himself he knew it was going to happen, and he just cleared off for the day. He went hunting in Wrocław, not so not so far from where I am right now, and to keep himself out of the way. Oh, thank you. Right, Rommel knew about it and said nothing. I think I think he may have known vaguely of it, but I don't think he did know, to be quite honest. Rommel, I think with Rommel is this: it's because he was a you've seen it. Oh, he's a good guy. He was all right, no problem with Rommel. And this is because of where he was in his behavior in the desert. It was a gentleman's war, so to speak. Rommel was a hardcore Nazi at the beginning. He was starting it when officers were still saluting. He would turn up and say Heil Hitler. It was Rommel. I think I've even got a photograph. I must have published a photograph of Rommel in Goslar with Hitler in 1934. In Gdynia in 1939, he was head of the Führer escort battalion. What Raymer actually, he was in charge of it after the bomb plot. There's a link between the two of them, and now. Raymer, after the war, he wasn't a member of the Nazi Party. Now there's plenty of Goebbels made him out to be a hero. First of all, Raymer and Goebbels, obviously, they must have had this bond on the 20th of July because it was the two of them sort of working together to defeat it. And Goebbels, being a propaganda person, he made Raymer out to be the hero, and this is the hero. Now he's the villain, but he's the one who single-handedly defeated the uprising, or the planned uprising. But as I hope I've just shown now, that's not true. Raymer had a minor role, but that's all it was. The coup. The steps to stop the coup had been taken beforehand. The only thing that Raymer did was he took down the cordons and nothing else. Indeed, Raymer said he was quite annoyed when he heard about the shooting of the in the Bendel block, because he'd done everything without no violence had occurred in Berlin until that actually happened. And he said he was quite proud of that, and even though some units did come close to shooting at each other, and of that we're pretty clear. Raymer was clearly off his rocker in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Here's an interesting thing. According to the West German security services, in documents declassified in 2012, so 50 years after the fact, Raymer was involved in arms smuggling for Fidel Castro. He was directly working for Castro. And not only that, in his he had this thing called Raymer Depeche, the Raymer Depeche, what is in English, the Raymer News or something, and which he was putting out a pamphlet, and in this he was arguing in the 80s that Germany, West Germany that is now, should be aligned with the Soviet Union against the United States and the United Kingdom. That was he was arguing. So I spoke to David Irving about him, and he told me that he'd met him in a hotel and he spent 15 minutes with him before realizing anything he said was completely pointless, and he was completely crazy. Nonetheless, I later found out that David Irving had actually shared a platform with him in 1990 at the Lowenbräu Keller in Munich. 800 people turned up at this neo-Nazi event. Anyway. Right, John says there's some very good sound videos of Raymer on YouTube. Hello, Mariusz. There are some things with him in. The thing with Raymer is he doesn't remember. He gets names wrong as well. And whereas I know what I've just said is largely based on what he said. Right, so I appreciate that. So the main source of my knowledge of Berlin on the 20th of July comes from Raymer. and putting things together because everybody else is dead, and it all happened so quickly that they died. They didn't get a chance to write the memoirs. Most of these people were dead within 2 weeks. I'm exaggerating now, but with most of these people, the first trial was held on 17th of August, and there was another trial the following week. But there were 200 death sentences passed by Rotland Freisler alone in the show trials. So, for example, Goebbels is dead, Hitler is dead. Riemer's the only witness to this conversation. Therefore, we've got to take his word for it. But at the same time as taking his word, we've got to balance it with what other things happening around happen as well. Now, Riemer, for example, in one of the interviews he gives on which you'll find on YouTube, and he talks about a general. I've forgotten the name of the general, but I spent 20 minutes trying to find it. And I thought, he's made a complete. It's von Mackensen he's referring to, but I can't remember. I wrote it down somewhere what he said. He got the name completely wrong. Another thing he said, for example, he said that von Brautisch was seen in full uniform. Now, I don't know where he got that from, but he said that Lieutenant Hagen, had told him that von Brautisch. Von Brautisch on the 20th of July, and I tried to check this, was actually he was in Czechoslovakia. He had a place called Třetúbky, which he was an estate he was given in 1942 because he was sacked by Hitler 19th of December 1941. And so I think anybody was in full uniform. It was Witzleben, and Witzleben turned up in uniform later. Maybe it was General Beck, because he turned up with his civilian stuff on, then he changed into his military uniform, I think, or he brought it with him anyway. Maybe when he was killed, he wasn't in uniform, but anyway. So. Good, right. Tomorrow I've got a video related to the place where Stauffenberg slept on his last night. So I filmed his brother's house, his brother's place in Berlin-Wannsee. So you can see that. It's a very nice street he lived in. And the night after that, I've got a very short video on the execution of a German resistance member, which took place in 22nd July 1943. So, and then I've got a small video on Mussolini, and I've also got hay fever, but it's not as bad this year as it's been in previous years. Right, so thanks very much for watching. I hope you found that interesting. And so near the Wannsee Villa, Tristanstrasse, you could look it up actually. It's approximately 2.5 kilometers, something like that, from the Wannsee Villa. So Tristanstrasse is to the east of Wannsee S-Bahn station. And the Wannsee Villa is to the west. I also filmed the place where it was originally, the Wannsee conference was originally going to be held at, which is a private house, so I had to do it quite surreptitiously. Oh, another interesting thing there is the Goebbels. Goebbels had 2 houses on an island on Havel Lake called Schwammenwerder Island, and anyway, I went there and I filmed the Goebbels house, even with people living in them, so I had to sort of be careful as I did it. All right, very good. So, John writes, Beck tried to shoot himself twice before it was done for him. And, Mario says, interesting your historical live and canal YouTube. Thank you very much. And I think, Marish, I think we know each other, don't we? Beck. This is a horrific death, I think, in many ways. I mean, he tried to shoot himself twice, and twice he missed. So he asked for a pistol for personal reasons, and he missed first time. He was still alive. Then they tried to do it for him, but he had enough strength to actually try and do it, get the gun himself and try and make a second. But he made a hash of it, and then he was dragged outside by a staff sergeant who killed him. And it's a pretty horrible way of going, I think, really. But having said that, wasn't as bad as what would have happened anyway. When was the assassination reported in the United Kingdom? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer is. When was it first known? I know when it was first known in Lublin, actually, but in the UK, I don't know. I asked Toivo Blatt, who escaped from Sobibor, when he was in Lublin. Lublin had been captured by the Red Army by this time, so he was out of hiding, and he said that yeah, it was the following day, that by the 21st of July they all knew it. So yeah, so I like to visit Poland's more and historical. Yes. Anyway, good. Anyway, there's the bell for 9 o'clock. I've got another video coming up in 15 minutes time on my other channel, so I better go and do that. And so thanks very much everyone who's here again. And oh, sorry, just a minute. There was a barge tied up at the Goebbels house near Wannsee that Magda considered escaping on. No, that's not quite, John. There was a Hitler suggested to Magda, he did suggest her getting out via waterways, but she around the 28th, I think, or 27th of April 1945. So yes, so thanks Colin, happy motorhoming, and so yep, and all the best from me. So bye for now. Bye. Thank you. Bye. I'll do another live one in a couple of days' time. I'll have to find a suitable theme though. Thank you. Bye.